Would you like to take a windowsill that's beat up like this and turn it into a nice new looking windowsill like this? If so, you're going to like this video. And if you do, hit that like button and subscribe. I'm at my daughter's house. I'm about to start a window repair here. You can see that the dog has just ripped this sill off. He got a hold of it. Once he got a hold of it, he could just tear the whole thing off. Dog suffers a little bit from anxiety. There he is, right there. You did that, didn't you? This house was built in 1929, so it has some old fluted trim on the side of the windows, and we tried to preserve some of that when the house was redone. So I'm going to replicate this portion along the window here as best I can, and then also the trim underneath the sill was torn off as well, so I'm going to have to replace that. So here's what the trim should look like. And you can see that it's got some little bit of decorative along the edge here. I don't think I'm going to be able to duplicate that. And then it comes down with just a straight piece at the bottom, and then another piece here with a little more straight at the bottom. So that I think I can probably replicate fairly easily. We'll see how it comes out. One of the first things we'll have to do is just slice along where the caulking is here to try to not tear up too much of the paint. We'll have to come back and scrape it afterwards, but we can slice that off and then start to separate the sill that's remaining, pull out the nails from the old trim and sill, and then we'll go from there. So we'll finish going around and cutting this caulking. You can see that's actually separated pretty well already. Then we're going to come back and start taking out the remainder of this sill, which doesn't appear as though it's going to be too difficult. They actually have this sill separated into two pieces, but they both come under the frame here. There's a 2x4 behind here, so we'll figure that out when we get to it. Where there's nails, you can get in there and try to get them out as best you can. If you can get them out sooner rather than later, it's going to make taking that piece of trim out a little bit easier. And the way he broke it off, I can kind of get to some of them. So like I say, we'll just work a little bit at a time here. Taking our time, we don't want to destroy any of the substructure or hurt these windows while we're doing this. So take your time getting this trim piece out. I'm going to work on this and then I'll bring you back. One of the things I'll point out here is that we're working with plaster walls. So when you're working with plaster, you want to be extra careful when you're pulling nails and so forth, because if you got a nail stuck in there and you pull it out, you don't know, a whole bunch of that plaster could come out and create a hole, and then you've got to go back and patch that. Now, in our case, I was able to get those nails out pretty carefully because I'm aware of the fact that these are plaster walls. But when you're dealing with plaster walls, you just want to be a little bit more careful, because unlike drywall, they will fracture and crack and big chunks of the plaster will come out. Now we've gotten this first piece of sill out of here. I'm going to come back and just scrape off the extra caulking it's still sitting on the window. So when I put that other piece of trim back in here and re-caulk it, the trim will sit nice and flat against the window, and it'll be a nice smooth job when I re-caulk it. So that's actually pretty darn clean right there. I'll come back and do some of these edges, and I'll have to clean around the trim on both sides. But we'll have this all cleaned up and ready to go for our next phase of this project. Now, one thing I try to do is to clean up as I'm going along. When they moved in, they had all these wood floors refinished, and they really look nice. And I don't want to risk stepping on a piece of wood, or you heard that nail just move around over there. I don't want to step on anything like that and gouge these floors. So every once in a while, I'll stop and just sweep up and make sure I don't have anything that I'm going to step on. We got this window pretty cleaned up here. Got all the old trim out. There's a few places, a place right here where I'll have to repair the plaster, but that's no big deal. I could just do that with some drywall mud. Another little place here, when I pulled it out and didn't get the caulking out good enough, see it tore a little piece of this trim out. I'll just put some glue behind that and clamp it, and that will be fine. Other than that, we're pretty much cleaned up here and ready to start figuring out how to replace this. I wanted to use just a plain piece of 1x poplar, 1x3 poplar. And as I started to do that, I found that 1x poplar actually will not fit under the trim here on the window. So interestingly enough, on the other windows, it is 3/4 of an inch, but on this window, it is less than that. So I don't know why that is, but we're going to have to cut just a little bit out of this trim to make sure that our board will slide under there when we put our trim piece, when we put our sill trim piece in here. And to do that, we're going to use a plunge saw, which is a saw that just allows you to go straight in like that and cut out the piece that you need to cut out. Now on the side here, I can just go right over the board that I'm going to use, because this is so thin that it'll just slide right over that and it'll cut that in there perfectly, so I'll know where to go. Okay, I've got it marked. We'll cut the rest of that piece out. Now you see that that trim board is going to fit under there, and with a little bit of caulking, it'll be just perfect. So I'll continue to cut the rest of this trim on the other side, and we'll be ready to go to start to measure off the sill plate and put that on there. So behind all of this trim, there are braces. So just like there's a 2x4 here, there's 2x4s behind here and on each end. So in order for us to be able to get this to slide in and slide flush with the windows, we have to notch out this board on the ends and in here in the middle, so it'll be able to slide in around those 2x4 structural pieces. All right, so we've notched our 1x3 windowsill piece out here. So it'll slide in here, and it looks like it's going to fit pretty good. Yep, right up against the window. Perfect. So now there's our sill piece done. Still has to be taken back out and painted and so forth, but already quite an improvement. So what we're doing now is just filling in some area with kind of drywall mud. It's called dry deck spackling by DAP, D-A-P. And I'm using this instead of drywall mud because it goes on pink. You can see exactly what I'm doing. So I'm just slowly filling that in. I'm not going to put a lot in. It's going to take 2 coats. And I just want to fill in these really rough areas here so my trim will sit nice and smooth when I put it on here. As I said, this is it's going to take a couple of coats, so I'm going to put some on now, and then I'll come back and I'll put some more on later. And you'll notice, if you look over here, you'll see where any place where there were scratches in the wall from the dog, I went ahead and just skim coated that. And so that'll be nice and smooth when we get ready to paint. So this is the board that I put together to replace the trim below that window. It's almost impossible to match the original trim on those windows. This home was built in 1929. So without actually going out and having a piece of trim specifically milled, you just have to do the best you can to match it. So I know there's a longer flat piece on top, and then there's a ridge here, and then a smaller piece on the bottom. And it's not very thick. This is only about 1/4 of an inch thick, as is the trim on the window. So what I wound up doing was getting 2 pieces of lattice, a wider, like 2-inch piece of lattice and a 1-inch piece of lattice, and then I glued these together along the seam there. Then I came back and got this trim here that I was able to glue along that seam. So like the other window, it'll have a broader flat piece above, and then the ridges here, and then a smaller flat piece below. So here's an end view of the trim board that I made. This might give you a better idea. So there's the wider piece of lattice there. This is the thinner piece of lattice in width. And then this is the small piece of molding that I put across the seam when I joined those 2 together. So I glued this up last night to make sure that it would be dry for me to work with today. So I'm going to go ahead and, while the wall is drying from the drywall that I just showed you, the drywall mud I put on, I'm going to go ahead and paint this trim and paint the window sill itself. So we'll be ready to put those back up when I get the wall finished. We've painted our inside sill with 2 coats of trim paint and repositioned that back in position. And then we will add our trim piece that we made underneath here. This also has 2 coats of trim paint on it. We'll put this all in with brad nails. Then I'll come back and caulk in any gaps that are left. And once that's done, I'm going to bring you back and show you the final product. But it really looks pretty good. I'm very happy with the way it's coming out. So we've completed our windowsill project. I'll take you in a little bit closer. You can see that it really came out pretty nicely. Once you put that caulking in there, the trim has been painted, the wall beneath the trim has all been painted. So all the evidence of the dog damage is now gone. I'll take you over to the other window just so you can see that trim. So here's the trim. The original trim looks like that. And then coming back to the window we did, that's what the new trim looks like. So I'm pretty happy with the fact that the trim matches pretty well. Well, I'm pretty happy with the way this project turned out. But generally, I'm always happy with the way my projects turn out. I take my time, I think things through, I watch other people's YouTube videos to see how they've done things. And then I just get to it and get it done. And generally, if you take your time and you try to do a good job, it will be a good job. So I hope this video was helpful to you if you have a project like this. If it was, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. And thanks for watching.